Coming to you from the Deep South, this is the Blue Collar Leadership Podcast. High impact leadership is not reserved for leaders, and it has nothing to do with your position, title, or rank. However, it does have everything to do with your character. It's time to climb to the next level and beyond, personally and professionally. Now, let's start making it happen with your host, Mac Story.
All right. Thanks for stopping by the Blue Collar Leadership Podcast today. So today I'm going to talk to you about something that I didn't know about it until I was leading a lean manufacturing team through process improvement. And I was talking to them about leadership development and things like that. And I was talking to them about leaders, about people getting promoted into positions. And then they couldn't do the job. You know, they couldn't lead well. And everybody knows this. Everybody knows about it. Everybody sees it, no matter which organization you're in. And what I'm talking about is you say, how did somebody, so how did so-and-so get promoted into that position? They can't do the job. You see that in all types of industries, all types of companies. And what we're talking about is basically people are being promoted to their level of incompetence. Maybe they did a good job where they were at, then they get promoted and they get promoted to a position where they can't do the job. And then that's when we all say, how did they ever get this job? Well, they didn't get that job because of how they're doing the job they're in now, because they're not doing it or they're not doing it well. So how did they get it? And it's because they done well in the previous job. That's how, but you may not have seen that. You may not have been witness to that. Someone could get promoted and then you joined the company and they got promoted to a level where their incompetence shows up. But anyway, I was talking about that in class one day, or in my Lean Kaizen event, the training I was doing. And somebody says, "Oh, you're talking about the Peter Principle." I said, "What?" They said, "The Peter Principle. That's what you're talking about." And I had never heard of this. This was probably in 2009 or so. I'd never heard of it. I had experienced it just like you have. You may not have ever heard of it. You may not have known there's actually a term for it, a name for it, a label for it, and it's called the Peter Principle. And basically, if you look up the Peter Principle, basically what you're gonna learn is this the act of promoting someone to their level of incompetency. So really, when you start to think about it and you really start to understand it at a deep level, and I'm going to give you some examples and I'm going to talk about it. The main thing I want you to know is I want you to be aware of it. I want you to know why it happens. I don't want it to happen to you. And it may have already happened to you. And also, if you're a leader, you don't need to be doing it to other people. But you can't be aware of something until you're aware of something. And that's what I'm going to talk to you about today is becoming aware of the Peter Principle. So let's look at it from a personal level. How do I make sure it doesn't happen to me? And actually, let me just back up a second. Because why it happens to anyone is because they're not growing and developing themselves. That's why it happens. Some people are naturally good at certain levels. Let's say I got hired in at an entry level position. I may have already grown enough in my life, and I'll talk about my story, and I'll use it throughout today's podcast episode. But when I started in the manufacturing world, and I was hired at an entry level as an entry level machine operator. I mean, no one there was below me in the organization. I was at the ground level, entry level position, and I was actually just operating machinery, producing different types of steel parts and steel components, that sort of thing. But when I got on the job, all I had to do was learn the job. Most people do that. Most people will learn the job, but when it's a simple job. But see, it didn't take much effort for me to learn the job. I learned pretty quick. I learned to own the job while I was doing the work, and there was someone there doing it with me. So I started out, I was just walking around following them. And then eventually they was walking around following me while I did the work. And then Once they figure out I know how to do the work, they move on. So it took just a very minimal amount of me learning and growing. First thing I had to do was be able to work with a person that was training me. If I couldn't do that, I may already, flop around. I may have already reached my level of incompetence. Just being given a job, even though it's not a promotion, it's a promotion from not having a job. So in that sense, it's still the Peter principle. I could be given an opportunity to do a job, but if I couldn't do it, then I was promoted to my level of incompetence. And either I'll sit there and flop around and I'll be frustrated, my leaders will be frustrated, or either they'll terminate me, depending on how high up the org chart I am. Once I've grown a good ways and I moved up 3 or 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 positions, well, I might not get terminated, but then I get demoted. And nobody likes getting demoted. Once you get promoted, most of the time people have too much pride and ego to deal with being demoted. So that's not a good thing. It's not a good option. And a lot of times leaders don't want to demote people once they've promoted them. They want to help them do the job. And if they can't help them do the job, then they want to move them on out the door. So the key is you've got to be growing and developing yourself at every level. At every level, you've got to do it at some level. The farther up you climb in an organization, the more growth and development you have to actually exhibit. So I want to read something to you. If you've been following my podcast recently, I did a 4-part series a while back on trust. And in the book that I was talking about, The Speed of Trust, that I was kind of showcasing there was actually I was talking about content from the book, The Speed of Trust. But in there, he talks about the Peter Principle. And I remember when I read this book, by that time I had already heard about the Peter Principle. The person in the class that I was teaching, those folks the team I was leading, when they said what I was talking about was called the Peter Principle. First, I thought they were joking. You got to know this blue collar crowd that I was dealing with, and you probably already know. So when they called it the Peter Principle, I didn't know what they were talking about. Let's just say that. And I thought maybe they were joking around or something, but it's the truth. And then when I read about it in The Speed of Trust, that was just more validation. Of course, I went and read about it, but basically he says in there that, and I think I mentioned this before in the previous podcast, but this whole podcast is going to be about it this time. So even if I did mention it, just going to reemphasize it. But he talks about, someone getting promoted and they've got integrity. They have good intent. Maybe they've gotten results in the past, but they don't have the capability of getting results now. And that's what we're talking about. When we're saying you're getting promoted to your level of incompetency, what I'm really saying in simple terms is you're getting promoted to a level where you can't get results. That's the Peter Principle. When somebody promotes you into a position where you can't get results, it's called the Peter Principle. So, that could be someone who's honest and caring and produces the results necessary to be promoted to a new level of responsibility, but that they don't have the competence to handle that new level of responsibility. That right there is the Peter Principle in action. Basically, where you're promoting people to the level of their incompetence. And if he or she simply relies on the skills that got him or her to that level, if this person isn't involved in constantly learning, growing, and developing new skills, they won't have what's necessary to succeed in the new situation, in their new position, in other words. So it's what I talk to when I talk to leaders about this. I want to help them understand that they can identify it and stop it before it happens. But they got to be looking for it. So how do you make sure? Let's say, because in the blue collar world, a lot of people get promoted. I mean, a lot of people get promoted from the front lines because they do a good job on the front lines. They do the work well. And a lot of times it means they do their individual work well. And it could mean they work well with a team, but it doesn't always automatically transfer into a leadership role. Or they may get promoted into some other type of role, like could be into quality or safety, or back in my days, lean manufacturing and process improvement, that sort of stuff. All kind of areas you could get promoted into where you have a greater responsibility and something new to learn that you've never done before. So let's talk about these frontline people who get promoted into leadership positions. Let's say there's a crew of 10 people working on the front lines. It could be construction, it could be manufacturing, it could be airline ground handling, it could be anything, doesn't matter. But I got a team of 10 people. And let's say I'm a couple of levels up on the leadership org chart, and there's a supervisor on my team that reports to me. That supervisor leaves, I either terminate them or either they fire me and leave on their own. But for whatever reason, the supervisor leaves. Most often what happens is I would go find the best performer on the team, and that's who I'd promote. Whoever's getting the best results today on that team. And you got to understand, as a leader, and I'm trying to help you see it as a leader also, but also as that team member as I walk you through this. As a leader, I've got to know, just because they're doing a good job right now does not mean they're going to be a good supervisor whatsoever. And the last thing I want to do is promote them to a supervisor and then they can't do the job. If I do that, I'm responsible for putting the Peter principle into action. I'm promoting someone who's not going to do well. And if you're one of those 10 people and you want that supervisor position, the last thing you want is to be promoted into that position, be given responsibility and sometimes money, and then you can't do it. You flop around and you're stressed out and you're frustrated. Your team's stressed out and you're frustrated, and your boss is stressed out and frustrated. So as a leader, going back to me, I'm the person that's got to decide who's going to get promoted, and I can promote this person from within. What's the first thing that I need to look for? I need to be looking for who's provided the evidence that they are the kind of person that focuses on intentional growth and development. Because what I know is, let's say none of these 10 people have ever been in a leadership position. They've never been a supervisor. So what I know about these 10 is they've never done it. They have no idea what leading 10 people is like compared to just doing the work. They've never done it. They have no idea. The odds of them flopping around all over the place are pretty high. So imagine in my organization, we don't do any leadership development. We don't do any personal growth or character development. We're like most organizations. We do nothing. We do the work. When it comes to training and developing people, most of it's on-the-job training related to the work they're doing. Most companies, that's all they do. And they only do that because it's required. If they don't do that, no one can do the work. So imagine that's the environment. That's all we do is what's required. So as a leader, if I understand the Peter principle, I got to be looking for people who are doing more than it. Who are the hungry people? Maybe who are the people who are enrolled in some type of certificate program, or maybe they're enrolled in college, a community college or technical college. Doesn't matter, but they're into growth and development some way. Or maybe they're reading books and learning. Or maybe I hear them talking about some hobbies they have, and they're always learning new stuff and doing new things and getting better at it. That's the mindset you're looking for when you promote somebody. Anybody. It doesn't matter. I'm using, a production line, the workforce, and the first level supervision as an example. These principles, it applies at every level. I could be talking about a CEO promoting someone into an executive vice president position. If they've never been at that level, they've got to be the kind of person that's responsible for their own personal growth and development, or there's a high risk of me promoting someone to their level of incompetency where they can't achieve results. These are principles. They apply everywhere, at every level, to everybody. But I'm keeping it simple, just talking about the front line. So let's imagine that we're the kind of company where we do growth and development. So we're doing book studies, that kind of stuff. Like a lot of the best clients that we have, that's what they do. They use my books and Ria's books to lead their teams through book studies. And there's a lot of reasons to do this. I mean, you want to grow and develop your team just in general so that they do a better job, so that they have a better life at home and at work, and especially at home. But if I'm actually leading my teams through book studies, that's actually creating an environment for me to learn who wants to grow and develop themselves. Who comes in hungry? Who comes in telling me they've already read the book from one end to the other, and they've already ordered another book, and they seem to be leading the discussion in the group? That tells me that's someone who leads themselves well. They're growing and develop themselves beyond what is required. They're not just showing up and doing the book study, and then they don't open the book until the next book study comes. So that's one reason for leaders to do book studies. There's many reasons, but this episode I'm talking about the Peter Principle. So leading your team through book studies, giving them opportunities for growth and development. Who's raising their hand asking for more responsibility? Who's avoiding responsibility? Those who are raising their hand, they're more likely not to get impacted by the Peter Principle. So I can give you an example. One time I was the lean manager in an organization, and I was the first one. There was never one before me, but I raised my hand and accepted that position. And then I needed some help. So then I had never read these books back then. This was probably around 2006 or 7. And I was looking for someone to help me. And I had been leading lean for a while, so I knew who was interested, who was hungry. I still had to go through the same junk like always, and I call it junk because just as I'm going to describe it, it doesn't mean anything. You just got to jump through the hoops, and it creates distrust with some people. Anybody who's applying for the job, they you always say, well, they already know who's going to get it. And in that case, I can tell you, I did already know who was going to get it if they applied. I didn't know if they were going to apply, but I knew I had been talking to them, and I knew who was going to get it because I knew out of all the people, I didn't care anything about seniority. I didn't care anything about somebody's competency relative to what they were doing at the moment. What I cared about was who wants to learn about lean, who wants to lead lean, who's been coming to me asking for books to read about lean because I had created a lean library. We had books and we had videos and all this kind of stuff. And I had created a bronze level certification and a silver level certification. Or actually, no, not at that time. I just had a bronze level certification back at that moment I'm talking about. So who had started doing things to get bronze certified, or who was bronze certified? Because that tells me who's got the most hunger for growth relative to lean. Out of 200 people or 200 plus people in that plant, who was the hungriest? That's who I wanted to hire. I could care less how long they've been there. And I already knew that because I was leading. Even though I never read these books, I was leading people because I was trying to get results as a lean manager. And so that was my job. So I already knew the people who were going to help me get results, they were on board. So I already knew who was on board. But you got to do what HR says, which is, post it. Got to wait. People's got to, all this, it's just a waste. From a lean standpoint, it's a waste. But that's a whole different talk about that sort of thing. And they need that sort of thing for most people who are just managing people because there's no leadership. So you need that sort of thing. So not always bad. It's a necessary evil in most cases. But anyway, I went and got the first person that I would actually would have wanted at that time. And that person, the Peter Principle was at play. Even though they were hungry, even though they seemed excited about it, once they got there, they were only hungry to get the job. They were not hungry to do the job because when they got there, they rested on their success of being promoted. So it didn't take long, and I demoted that person back to the production line. I mean, that person got lazy. They were not lazy before because they were doing what they needed to do to get the job they wanted. But when they got the job, they didn't do what they needed to do to keep the job, which was now get results in the job. So I demoted that person back, and they went back to production. And by that time, someone else had come to the surface. And I brought in that person. And that person was hungry to get the job. Then they were hungry to do the job. And they done extremely well because they wanted to do it for themselves. So the Peter Principle didn't happen with that person. And because that person was hungry and growing before, and then when they got into the position, they remained hungry and growing and developing themselves. Later, they moved and transferred, and they became like a lean coordinator, or lean manager in another plant in another state in our same company, doing the same thing I was doing. That's what that's the opposite of the Peter Principle. It's when you get promoted and you excel in that position, you get promoted again and you excel in that position. And for me, my own personal story, that's what it looked like for me. That's why I got promoted 14 times in 20 years. The Peter Principle, it ain't never happened to me. It ain't never going to happen to me. I'm in charge of that. I ain't going to ever get promoted to a position and accept a position. And when I get there, I don't slay the dragon. It's because I'm hungry to do well. I know I'm responsible. I don't just take the job for the money. But I was a machine operator and I done well, so I got promoted. But again, it was not my leaders necessarily who made all this happen. I could have easily gotten promoted and not done well because we didn't have any leadership development. We didn't have any growth and development. But what they did see is the very first spot they saw is I just did a good job. I was a top performer. Now, after that, they saw, oh, we give this man another opportunity, he'll slay the dragon. We give him another opportunity and he'll slay the dragon. We give him another opportunity and he'll slay the dragon. He's going to make it happen everywhere we put him. And that's what they saw. So I created my own track record. But then I started operating one simple bandsaw. Then they promoted me and I started operating a twin spindle lathe, which was a promotion in pay and a much more challenging piece of equipment. And then a few years later, I got promoted into a small work cell. So I was running multiple machines. And then I became what they called in my plant, they called it a rover, but basically it was a setup person. I had to learn to operate about 60 or 70 machines, probably closer to 70. I had to be able to run your cell when you were not at work or when you were at work and you had to change over and create a new kind of part and you got to change out the tooling on all the machines. I had to be able to come help you change out the tooling because it was quite often there was one person running 2 or 3 machines. So I can't change over but one machine at a time if I'm running that machine. So need some help. And I was that guy who would come in and help. So I was just bouncing around all over the plant. I could run all the equipment. I could help you run it. I could change it over. I could set it up. I could do all that stuff. But every one of those jobs, when I was running those jobs, I was reading manuals. I was learning all about the tools, all about the machines, stuff that I didn't know anything about. I was just bored. I'm just turning pages, reading these manuals. So I could have a conversation with the engineer, supervisor, maintenance at a higher level because I was learning about the machine. And then we started making adjustments to programs. I did. And the programmers would come out and show me how to change the program. And then they would edit it and make it a permanent change. And I was learning. I wasn't just watching, I was learning. And then later a position come open in the programming department. And I applied and I beat out a whole lot of people who were far ahead of me as far as seniority. And I beat them out because I had proven that I would intentionally grow and develop myself at every level and had a track record of success. So a lot of people got mad at me because I got promoted. Then I got in there and same thing. I learned more and learned more. And I got another promotion, cost estimation engineering. And then I went into process engineering, I got a 4-year degree during all that time, constantly growing and developing. You ain't going to promote me to a level that I accept that I can't make it happen. I'm going to read books. I'm going to study. In today's world, I'd say I'm going to listen to podcasts. I'm going to get on YouTube. I'm going to watch videos. I'm going to order books. I'm going to go to seminar, whatever it takes. I'm going to make it happen. Those kind of people, they don't have to worry about the Peter Principle. But a lot of people, they got to worry about it, especially if they're the leaders doing the promoting. So then I became lean coordinator, lean manager. Then I started my own business as a lean consultant. Then I became a leadership speaker and a leadership author. Constant growth and development. But again, I had someone who's a ops manager. They had promoted someone up to be a supervisor. And they called me recently as someone I mentor from time to time. And they were just talking about, the whole situation. And they started talking about how good a job the person did before at the previous level. And then they promoted this person to a supervisor position. And now they're kind of flopping around. They show up late. They're not responsible. When they had somebody looking over the shoulder, they was doing fine, on the front lines. But now they're in a leadership position and they're responsible for looking over shoulders. And the people above them don't want to have to look over their shoulder anymore. And this person just couldn't lead themselves well. And as the person that called me was talking, basically I heard him describing the Peter Principle. And I asked him, I said, "You know about the Peter Principle?" And he was like, "No, I don't know about that. I ain't heard of that." So I talked to him about it. I explained it to him. It's the reason I'm doing this podcast now, because it, he brought it to my level of awareness that I hadn't done a podcast on this, and I need to do one. But he was having the same issue, you know, and do I demote this person or do I terminate them? And that's terrible as a leader to have to do that to someone, because you promoted them, you put them in that situation. They were doing fine. And what I was talking with this person and what I'm talking to you about is you need to know about the Peter Principle so you don't do this to people. So that you can explain to them, if they want to get promoted, they need to be growing and developing themselves. They need to provide the evidence to support your belief and their belief that they're going to be able to do the job. If you buy them a book, you say, "Hey, here's a book. Read this and let me know what you get out of it." If you hand that to somebody, you could just do that as a kind of like a filter. It doesn't matter what the book is about. It could be related to the work, or it could be related to character development, leadership, teamwork, communication, time management, or the competency of doing the job. You give them a book and say, "Hey, when you get done with that, come back to me and let me know what you got out of it." If they don't come back fairly soon, depending on how big the book is, if they don't come back in a couple of weeks, you may not be interested. But don't go chase them down. Don't say another word to them. If they don't ever bring that book back, they're not going to get promoted if I'm the one that gave them the book. And if you still promote somebody who doesn't want to grow and develop, shame on you as a leader. That's pitiful, pathetic leadership. Maybe perfect management, because that's what people do. That's the way managers do. It ain't about the people. It's about the process and the work and the organization. And so they just promote somebody doing a good job. And then when they get to that level and can't do a good job, and now the leader who promoted them looks bad, they blame the person. Well, the person who's not doing a good job didn't put them in that position. The leader who promoted them put them in that position. That's where ultimate responsibility lies. That's why most companies, they don't do any development. The stuff I'm talking about, you can't just fix it by going to flip a switch. You got to put in a full-blown personal growth and leadership development program. It ain't a program when you do it nonstop, but you got to do it so you can identify the people who are hungry for growth and development. And then you give them opportunities. And it may not be the person you always thought was going to be the person. All you need to know as a leader is, I need somebody who's going to get into this position and kill it. And if they can't kill it, they're going to grow and develop themselves until they can kill it. Then you'll have a high performance team. But if you don't do that, you're going to terminate or demote the person. Then you're going to promote someone else, the next best person that does a good job. And you're going to go round and around through the same cycle. Now, every now and then you might promote someone who hadn't been in that job, and they get in there and they feel the pressure and they step up to the plate. They kill it in their first leadership position. Then they get promoted again, and they may step up again. And then they get promoted again, and they tired of stepping up. Guess what you just done? You just promoted them to their level of incompetence. So go out there, look for the people who are making it happen in their life, whatever that means, personal growth and development. You give those people promotion opportunities. Don't just worry about who did a good job. That's just a small portion of it. Because doing the job and motivating and inspiring someone else to do the job requires a completely different skill set. So if you want to know more about the Peter Principle, get on Google or whatever, do some research, find out about it. and make sure you avoid it. Don't be the leader that's promoting people to the level of incompetence. But I can tell you, a leader who's doing that, they've already been promoted to their level of incompetence because they can't lead at the level they need to lead at. And a lot of times these people, they don't even know it. They don't even have a clue. Talk to you next time.
Make it happen or someone else will. It might as well be you. Are you serious about taking your career and your life to the next level and beyond? Check out Mac Story's Blue Collar Leadership series books and others, now available on audio, along with paperback and ebooks at Amazon, iTunes, and Audible. Please visit bluecollarleadership.com to learn about Mac's books, programs, special offers, certifications, and more. Thank you for listening to the Blue Collar Leadership Podcast.